So now we're going to go into some more detail about what's inside a certificate. PKI stands for Public Key Infrastructure and is actually a companion technology to asymmetrical or public key encryption. One of the things that's in there is a serial number. Every certificate has a unique serial number and validity dates. There's also some secure attributes, and an example of one would be the email address. The idea is a certificate will not be issued to you if your email address is not valid. I can't claim to be Barack Obama at whitehouse.com and get a certificate from a valid entity like VeriSign. They would never give it to me unless they validated I was in fact Barack Obama. There could be other things in there like license strings and perhaps your name or a phone number or those kinds of things, a credit card number, that sort of thing. There are other things in there as well which are unsecure attributes which are there for reference purposes. In addition, there's a public key in there, which is the corresponding key to the private key. And then there's a digital signature. And again, I'm not going to get into the details of how that all works, but the idea there is that the certificate is digitally signed by an entity like a VeriSign or a certificate authority. So what can you do with public key cryptography with certificates? As we talked about before, you can do an authentication. And for example, if I send you my certificate and one of my secure attributes is my email address, then you know that I am Barack Obama or Mark Schaefer at graniteKey.com. I could do a key exchange as we discussed before, and that's commonly done in SSL, HTTPS. I authenticate and then I switch to a key exchange and I do a symmetrical encryption. Of course, that happens under the covers. You don't see that happening. I could have integrity. I can make sure that that none of the data has been changed. I can also do a signature where I can sign, using my email, I can sign a document saying I authorize you to charge me $10,000 for this new car that I'm buying from you. And our good friend non-repudiation. And then finally, I can do a license or feature enforcement. It's very common, for example, for a certificate to be presented to a host from a peripheral, offering to it the features that are available. And as long as it has a digital signature, you can use that as a way to enforce a license string. And the good thing about using PKI is these certificates can be used in a variety of ways. The idea is you have the infrastructure in place, for example, a board ID chip or some other chip. What you can do is that you can use that certificate to provide a variety of services using standard PKI infrastructure, and then you can use your companion technology, which is symmetrical encryption, to provide bulk encryption or bulk transfer of data that's secure. So in summary, what are some best practices in security? One is that any key, Murphy's Law, if you have any private or symmetrical key that is not stored in hardware, it's going to be compromised, especially in a system that has a high value. Another one is you need to use a true random number generator, which is kind of a geeky thing, but if you were a security geek, you would insist on a true random number generator to make sure that the security and the challenges are truly random challenges and nobody can guess what they are. In terms of the communication, as we indicated before, challenge and response, keys are never released, secrets are never released, and that when you do open up a secure channel, when you do use symmetrical encryption to send data using a symmetrical key, that you randomize the data and you make sure the data hasn't been changed. And these are some general guidelines that you need to think about when you're creating a secure system. Now, in terms of our agenda, we're going to move on to more of the business side of security. So we just reviewed the challenges in understanding the fundamentals of security technology. Now we get to the most difficult part, the management of security. So in a development lifecycle, typically you're going to start off with a business case. And in the case of security is, for example, one of our customers, they were losing 30 to 40% of their revenue on their peripherals from clones. You have a pretty strong business case from that if you have enough volume. Now what you would do is you would do a risk analysis. What is it about our business, about our technology that can be compromised easily, and what are some of the security measures we can put in place? If you go back to the analogy where we had secure boot, we had a secure ROM, and we had various metal boxes we can put around these things, we could put a security guard in place. What are the different things that at the system level, we're not talking about, am I going to use RSA 1024 or RSA 2048. We're talking about at a system level, what are the different levers on a business and technology level that I can use to try to reduce my risk of failure? And the ultimate decision is a financial decision. And now the easy part comes. Once I've decided the technologies that I want to deploy and the kind of design I need in my system and how I'm going to measure failures and the business processes I'm going to put in place, I can begin to train people and design prototypes. This is what SDKs are for. And then finally, what I need to do is once I go into production, something that you really need to consider is that once I put my solution in place, I need a provisioning process. If I'm going to be using certificates, I need a process to issue those certificates and to make sure the certificates are only issued to authorized parties into authorized devices. Traditionally, a lot of PKI solutions have been used to issue VPN tokens. They were issuing security for people. They did not directly impact your revenue. But when you talk about device security, you're directly impacting your revenue. Every certificate you issue to a $1,000 peripheral is worth $1,000, right to the bottom line, right to the CEO, right to the board level. And unfortunately, what happens is the most important step is the business case and the risk analysis. We make money doing security implementations, but the most important part of security is making sure that the money you're spending on security is being well spent. And it's very common for a lot of customers to focus right into the security technologies. I cannot emphasize this enough, that understanding the business case, viewing security as a financial decision is the most important point that I'm trying to make in this presentation. And I cannot emphasize that enough. So now let's get into some of the challenges at the management level. What is your security objective? As I mentioned before, your objective is not to be more secure. Your objective is not to deploy security technology. Your objective is to save money or save lives. So let's look at the complexity of that. First, in terms of the lowest level of security, it's very common. The most common objective for security is for compliance or marketing parity. An example would be, in order to get into the market, in order to have a voting machine that you deploy into the market, you have to reach a minimum level of security. And the regulatory agency run by the government is going to tell you the minimal level of security you need to comply. And a lot of folks are focused on that. Another example would be biometrics. Biometrics actually reduce security. And the reason is, for example, that if you swipe your finger with a biometric and it fails, a lot of times you have what's called a backdoor. You can put in your password instead of security. So the problem there is that the security of your fingerprint does not actually improve security. It may appear that it does. The illusion of security is being created, but in reality, you have reduced security because you now have two ways to get into your system. One is your password, and the other one is your fingerprint. If I explain this to you, it becomes obvious, but it's not obvious if you're really excited about the technology. We work with a lot of customers that are really focused on compliance and marketing parity. And if that's your business objective, and you explain that, and you're not in denial about that, we have no problem working with you on that. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of people do that. The second level of objective would be at a higher level of security. It's very common for folks to deploy security to reduce or divert liability. We want to put something in place. So for example, if there's a problem and somebody comes to sue us, what's going to happen is we have something in place. It's more of a legal issue. We generally try to avoid working in that scenario, as we recommend that people do. The other one would be revenue assurance. And this is the most common area that we work in. We have customers who have been hacked. They've lost 30% of their revenue. They don't care about the technology. The CEO, the board of directors, wants to make sure that they're not being clawed. They want to protect their intellectual property. They're driven by return on investment. They've been hacked before. The board level's really managing this at an enterprise level. And in many cases, they have a high enough volume where even if they're going to spend money on the security technology, it's going to be worth it because 30% of their revenue is a very large number. And finally, we also work with folks where failure is not an option. We're talking about saving lives. And in this case, when you work with folks in the military, Department of Defense, you generally get people who are really, really dedicated to ensuring that security is done properly because they understand the importance of saving lives. So it's very important, in summary here, to really understand what are my true security objectives. And the warning is that it's very often that management will not make this clear because the business case is not clear. This is the biggest challenge in security.